The Pacific Northwest, Alaska, and Hawaii have the highest concentrations of the 169 active volcanoes in the United States. Since active volcanoes can go dormant for up to 10,000 years, not all of them are in immediate danger of erupting. However, some of them may do so soon, according to scientists. The U.S. Geological Survey categorized 18 volcanoes as very high hazards based on their eruptive history, current activity, and proximity to people in an update to its National Volcanic Threat Assessment, published in October. So from the least destructive to the most destructive, here are 18 volcanoes that could cause catastrophic event when they ultimately explode. Number 18. Long Valley Caldera, California. Long Valley Caldera in California was created by a super eruption, or VEI8 eruption, around 760,000 years ago that ejected over 1,400 times more lava, gas, and ash than Mount St Helens produced in 1980. Despite the fact that the caldera hasn't erupted in thousands of years, the USGS states that it remains firmly active, with many hot springs and fumaroles, and has had significant deformation, seismicity, and other unrest in recent years. Researchers found indications of a sizable magma reservoir beneath Long Valley in 2018, which was thought to contain 240 cubic miles of molten rock. That, according to the findings, is sufficient to support another super eruption of comparable size to the well-known one from 760,000 years ago. Number 17. Crater Lake, Oregon. About 7,000 years ago, Mount Mazama witnessed a series of powerful eruptions that shook the volcano, ejecting rock as far as Canada, and creating pyroclastic flows that reached 25 miles. This eruption-induced eruption created Oregon's Crater Lake, which is now enclosed by the volcano's collapsed caldera. The Holocene, the present geological age that started about 11,500 years ago, has seen some of the greatest eruptions that are known to have occurred. This area last experienced an eruption roughly 6,600 years ago. Future eruptions at Crater Lake are expected to pose a very high threat, according to the USGS. The nearby large city of Klamath Falls, with a population of roughly 21,000, could be impacted by volcanic activity. Number 16. Mauna Loa, Hawaii. Mauna Loa in Hawaii, which is close to Hilo and Holualoa, has been added to Mount Rainier's list of decade volcanoes. The mountain's top rises more than 10.5 miles above its base, despite the fact that it may not appear large from the ground up if you count the extensive submerged flanks that lower the seafloor. Mauna Loa's slow, oozy eruptions, similar to those of Kilauea and other Hawaiian volcanoes, have given rise to a broad dome. The lava flow from Mauna Loa's last eruption in 1984 came within 4 miles of Hilo, a city of 45,000 people. It has erupted 33 times in recorded history, including the two major ones, which happened in 1950 and 1859, as well as one in 1880 to 1881 that covered area that is currently inside the city boundaries of Hilo. This makes it a particularly active volcano. According to some scientists, the 2,000-year cycle is about to terminate, and the summit's lava flows are expected to grow in the northwest and southeast. Number 15. Glacier Peak, Washington. One of only 2 volcanoes in Washington to have produced large, explosive eruptions in the past 15,000 years is Glacier Peak in the Cascades. The other is, of course, Mount St Helens. Its magma can't ordinarily flow out the eruptive vent because it is too viscous, so instead it shoots out at great pressure. Glacier Peak erupted 9 times within a few hundred years around 13,000 years ago. More than 5 times as much rock was ejected by the greatest eruption than from Mount St Helens in 1980. Glacier Peak, as its name implies, has also seen major lahars and pyroclastic floods and is extensively covered in ice. The volcano last erupted roughly 300 years ago, and the USGS predicts that it won't do so anytime soon because of how far apart its eruptions are spaced. Even still, the top is keenly watched since Seattle, which is 70 miles distant, could be in danger from an eruption. Number 14. Mount Baker, Washington. Mount Baker, which supports more ice than all the other peaks in the range, apart from Mount Rainier, is the most glaciated mountain in the Cascades after Mount Rainier. As a result, it poses many of the same mudslide risks as Rainier, despite the fact that strata dating back 14,000 years reveal Baker to be less explosive and active than some other Cascade summits. It frequently erupted in the 1800s and has since created hazardous pyroclastic flows. These flows don't always need a large-scale eruption like lahars. When Baker started generating enormous amounts of volcanic gases and its heat flows multiplied, it gave the inhabitants a scare in 1975. But the anticipated eruption never materialized. The fumarolic activity is still there today, but there is no proof that it is connected to the magma flow that would indicate an impending eruption. Number 13. Newberry Volcano, Oregon. One of the biggest volcanoes in the contiguous United States is Oregon's Newberry Volcano, which has an area of around 617 square miles, about the size of Rhode Island, in the eastern Cascades. The Shield volcano features a sizable 17-square-mile summit caldera that is home to Paulina Lake and East Lake. Within the Deschutes National Forest, the region is preserved as the Newberry National Volcanic Monument. Since the early Holocene epoch, Newberry has erupted at least 11 times and has a minimum age of 500,000 years. The USGS ranks it 13 in its most current National Volcanic Threat Assessment, despite the fact that it hasn't erupted for millennia, and still considers it an active volcano with a very high threat rating. It is situated about 20 miles south of Bend, Oregon, and if any of its past eruptions occur again, lava flows may pass into residential areas. Number 12. Augustine Volcano, Alaska. In the southwest of Cook Inlet, Alaska's Augustine Volcano creates the uninhabited Augustine Island, which is almost entirely made up of deposits from previous eruptions. Over the previous century, it has erupted multiple times, most notably in 1908, 1935, 1963, 1971, 1976, 1986, and 2005. The most recent one produced ash clouds that traveled hundreds of kilometers downwind and included pyroclastic flows and lahars. Lava flows followed this explosive activity, and they persisted for several months before the activity ultimately died out in the spring of 2006. The most historically active volcano in the eastern Aleutian Arc is Augustine, which has approximately 24 known eruptions during the current Holocene epoch. Augustine is still regarded as one of Alaska's most dangerous volcanoes due to its potential to impede air traffic, despite the latest activity being observed in 2010. Number 11. Lassen Peak, California. Lassen Peak, the Cascades' southernmost active volcano, contains one of the planet's largest lava domes, measuring half a cubic mile in size. It is the greatest volcanic dome to erupt in the past 300,000 years out of more than 30 found in Lassen Volcanic National Park. Lassen awoke on May 30, 1914, after a 27,000-year nop. For a year, it erupted in steam and lava, causing several explosions, avalanches, and lahars. 3 square miles, today known as the devastated area, were completely destroyed by pyroclastic flows that were unleashed by a climactic eruption in May 1915 that threw ash 30,000 feet into the air. 200 miles away in Winnemucca, Nevada, volcanic ash made it there. The steam vents could still be seen in the 1950s, and the outbursts persisted into 1917. Even though Lassen Peak is presently inactive, it still poses a remote threat to some adjacent areas, including Chico and Redding. Number 10. Mount Spur, Alaska. With a height of more than 11,000 feet, Mount Spur is the highest volcano in the Aleutian Islands. It is situated about 80 miles west of Anchorage, which is the largest city in Alaska. In the past 8,000 years, the volcano has erupted multiple times, including more recent eruptions in 1953 and 1992, both of which had VEI values of 4. Both of those eruptions produced ash deposits in Anchorage and were caused by Mount Spur's newest vent, Crater Peak. Mount Spur, like many Alaskan volcanoes, has the potential to disrupt air travel by pouring tall ash clouds into important trans-Pacific aviation routes. in addition to the threat it poses to Anchorage and its approximately 300,000 inhabitants. Number 9. Maksuskin Volcano, Alaska. The ice-covered Maksuskin Volcano is situated on the larger Unalaska Island, which is southwest of Autan. It's around 6,000 feet tall, but it's big and dome-shaped, unlike the volcanoes around it, which have steep sides. It shares the island with Unalaska, the largest settlement in the Aleutian Islands. In the past several thousand years, Maksuskin has erupted violently numerous times, occasionally producing pyroclastic flows and surges. An eruption that occurred about 8,000 years ago is estimated to have had a volcanic explosivity index score of 5. Since 1786, Maksuskin has experienced numerous small to moderate eruptions, with the most recent being a VEI-1 in 1995. High-temperature geothermal sites that indicate volcanic disturbance are still scattered throughout Maksuskin's summit caldera and eastern sides. The threat posed by the volcano is classified as very high because ash from an eruption might endanger the health of those living in Unalaska and impede essential air travel. Number 8. Autan Peak, Alaska. There are several coastal settlements and a sizable fish processing facility on the Aleutian Ark's Autan Island in the Bering Sea, which is located in Alaska. Autan Peak, a stratovolcano that towers 4,274 feet above the island, is also located there. With over 20 known eruptions since 1790, Autan is one of Alaska's and the Aleutian Islands' most active volcanoes overall. There were 11 eruptions between 1980 and 1992, and even though there haven't been any since, there are always signs of activity. For instance, a seismic swarm that occurred in 1996 resulted in modest damage and forced some locals and workers at the fish processing factory to leave the island. The Alaska Volcanic Observatory has observed noteworthy seismicity numerous times throughout this century, including more than 100 seismic occurrences in 2008. Fumaroles and hot springs are still active at Autan. Number 7. Three Sisters, Oregon. Although the Three Sisters volcanoes in Oregon, which are also part of the Cascade Range, are frequently clubbed together as a single entity, each one was generated from a separate type of lava at a different time. The South Sister, which last erupted around 2,000 years ago, is thought to be the most likely of the three to do so again. Neither the North nor the Middle Sister have erupted in roughly 14,000 years. According to the USGS, the South and Middle Sisters have both been periodically active for thousands to tens of thousands of years, and have the potential to erupt violently or build lava domes that could shatter into pyroclastic flows. The most recent eruptions of the South Sister produced rockfall that was over 7 feet deep and dispersed ash up to 25 miles from the vents. According to study, a new eruption could put nearby populations in risk within minutes, with a hazard zone measuring around 12 miles in circumference. Number 6. Mount Hood, Oregon. 50 miles east-southeast of Portland, Mount Hood, a 500,000-year-old stratovolcano, last erupted in the 1790s, right before Lewis and Clark arrived in the Pacific Northwest. Although historically, its eruptions have been unpredictable, the USGS claims that 2 specific eruptions may provide insight into potential future activity. Its peak and north flank collapsed during one that happened some 100,000 years ago, sending a lahar down the Hood River Basin, across the Columbia River, and up the White Salmon River Valley in Washington. Approximately 1,500 years ago, a small eruption caused a lahar that pushed the whole Columbia River north and lifted rocks up to 8 feet wide, 30 feet above the river's normal level. While Mount Hood might be too far away to hit Portland with a lahar, it still has the potential to cover the city in rock dust or ash, much like Mount St Helens did in 1980. Number 5. Mount Shasta, California. The stratovolcano Mount Shasta, which is only a few miles south of the Oregon-California border, is one of the Cascades' tallest summits at 14,162 feet. The frequency of eruptions has increased from 800 to 250 years over the last 10,000 years. It is believed that the last known eruption took place about 230 years ago. The USGS predicts that eruptions similar to those of the last 10,000 years will likely result in ash deposits, lava flows, domes, and pyroclastic flows. Low-lying locations up to 13 miles from Mount Shasta's peak and any active satellite vents could sustain harm from the floods. The city of Mount Shasta, which is located right on the volcano's flanks, may fall under this category. Number 4. Mount Redoubt, Alaska. The almost 11,000-foot tall stratovolcano that makes up Redoubt in Alaska's Lake Clark National Park and Preserve is what gives the Aleutian Range its tallest peak. With its current cone having formed about 200,000 years ago, it has been erupting for over 900,000 years. In the past 10,000 years, Redoubt has erupted at least 30 times, with the most recent eruptions taking place in 1902, 1966, 1989, and 2009. During the eruption of 1966, ice from the mountain's top crater began to melt, resulting in a form of glacial outburst flood known as Jökulhlaup, which is Icelandic for glacial run. The volcano erupted once more for many months 40 years later. Just prior to erupting, it generated up to 30 tremors per second and spewed ash clouds as high as 65,000 feet above sea level. Number 3. Mount Rainier, Washington. The tallest mountain in the contiguous United States, Mount Cascade, is a volcano covered with the most glacial ice. If or when the stratovolcano erupts, this puts Seattle-Tacoma, where Mount Rainier towers, in danger. Lahars can be produced by volcanoes that erupt through ice, as Mount St Helens showed in 1980. Approximately 5,600 years ago, Mount Rainier experienced a devastating eruption that resulted in 2 lahars that traveled all the way to Puget Sound. One of only 2 US-based decade volcanoes, those the UN deems highly harmful to human populations, Mount Rainier's inherent instability and closeness to big cities contributed make this designation. Larger eruptions of Mount Rainier have happened as recently as 1,000 and 2,300 years ago, although the most recent one was in the 1840s. It is currently regarded as active yet inert. Nevertheless, it is one of the volcanoes in the nation that is closely watched. Number 2. Mount St Helens, Washington. On May 18, 1980, a volcanic eruption, one of the worst in American history, took place about 50 miles northeast of Portland, Oregon. A portion of Mount St Helens was toppled by an earthquake, which also caused a landslide, a blast that sent a tower of ash 30,000 feet into the air, and tree damage over 230 square miles. Following eruptions delivered 50 to 80 miles per hour avalanches of hot ash, rocks, and gas barreling down the slopes. In total, more than 50 people and countless animals perished, and the total cost of repairs exceeded $1 billion. In 2004, 4 explosions hurled steam and ash 10,000 feet above the crater, reawakening Mount St Helens. Until it erupted and filled 7% of the 1980 crater in late January 2008, the bubbling lava formed a dome on the crater floor. The USGS continues to describe it as an active and dangerous volcano, even though it has slowed down lately. Number 1. Kilauea, Hawaii. The Big Island of Hawaii is made up of 5 volcanoes, with Kilauea being the most active. The Shield volcano, which is situated in the southeast of the island, has erupted 34 times since 1952. From 1983 to 2018, the most recent eruption lasted approximately 3 decades. For a large portion of that time, its slow-moving lava was generally innocuous. If anything, it produced beautiful scenery as it gradually extended the island of Hawaii, but it also occasionally discharges lava through new vents without any notice. This happened in 1990, and it largely damaged Kalapana. Kilauea's recent invasion of residential areas close to Pahoa in the spring of 2018 serves as a more current reminder of the volcano's possible peril. Numerous new eruptive fissures started to pour lava and hazardous sulfur gas into the Laloni Estates and Lanapuna Gardens areas, damaging scores of structures and requiring more than 1,700 residents to flee. And for this year, it already erupted 3 times from January to September. Within Hawaii Volcanoes National Park, Lava flows are released into the floor of Hala Maru crater by a number of roughly east-west oriented vents on the western side of the downdropped block within Kilauea's summit caldera. As in Wilson Schaaf says, trusting our intuition often saves us from disaster. You can suggest topics you want to see next in the comment section below. Please subscribe to Weather Collapse if you want to know more, and be updated on the latest news about natural calamities or disasters happening all over the world, and don't forget to like today's video. We'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.